The Travels and Adventures of Little Baron Trump and His Wonderful Dog, Bulger. Chapter 7, Part 6. I had followed Beni Aga's noiseless footsteps about half a mile into the stilly depths of Palin Matalin when I began to feel a strange chill creep over me, beginning at my very fingertips and pursuing its insidious way toward my very vitals. So rapidly did it run its benumbing course that I was upon the point of calling out to Beni Aga when he halted, and having broken a twig from a tree with foliage of dark green and polished leaves, bade me eat them, saying, Palin Matalin does no harm to those that know him. I found the leaves pungent and agreeable to the taste. Their effect was magical. My limbs at once forgot their numbness, and my step lost its heaviness. We had now been several hours in the great gloomy forest, and thus far Beni Aga had advanced into its ever-increasing gloom, for night was falling without a halt. Had Beni Aga had as many eyes as Argus and each of Lynx's power, he could not have pursued his way through Palin Matalin's gloomy corridors more easily and more securely. His polished wand flashed like a thing of life in his miraculously trained hand, touching everything, vibrating, swinging, advancing, retreating with a rapidity that my eyes could not follow. "O great master," I called out to him, "let me not be presumptuous enough to speak to thee of things which should be left unstirred in the chambers of my mind. But if it be permitted to me to know, tell me how thy rayless eyes can penetrate this gloom and find a path through this trackless forest, wrapped in the gloom and silence of 10,000 years." "It shall be as thou wishest, son," replied the blind hermit. "The little there is to know thou shalt hear, but surely thy young limbs must be weary. First, let me make ready a bed for the night and spread some food and drink." So saying, he swung his leathern bag off his shoulder, took from it a roll of dried skin, and spread it on the ground. Then, wrenching 4 pine boughs from a tree near by, he thrust them in the earth, one at each corner of a square, and striking a spark with his tinderbox, set fire to the pitch which trickled down the boughs. The flickering flumes cast 1,000 weird shadows on the trailing mosses and black shrouded trees, and filled the air with a grateful warmth. Beni Aga now drew forth some dried fruit and berries. We ate in silence. Bulger sniffed at the food, but nothing more. Our frugal repast concluded, the blind hermit took from his leathern pouch a sharp-pointed piece of flint, with which he pierced the bark of a tree near our bivouac. Into the hole he thrust a slender reed. I was astonished to see a limpid liquid flow from the end of the reed. He filled a gourd with it, and placing the drinking vessel in my hand, said in a low, caressing voice, "Drink, my son, 'twill refresh and strengthen thee." I raised the gourd to my lips. The liquid was cool and sweet and very pleasing to the taste. "Drink as deep as thou wilt, my son," cried Beni Aga, "for Palin Matalin would slake the thirst of an army." Again I placed the gourd to my lips. This time I drank long and deep. A gentle warmth now coursed through my limbs. My eyelids sank downward, oppressed with a most delicious longing for sleep. Pillowing my head on Beni Aga's pouch, with my hand resting on my faithful Bulger's head, I was soon wrapped in slumber. When I awoke, it was still night. The pine knots had burned nearly out. There sat the blind hermit beside me. I could see that he was keeping watch. His head turned as I stirred. "Thou hast asked me," he began, "to tell thee how I am able to find my way through Palin Matalin's gloom. Here, in this trackless home of shadow, no outward eye would avail me aught. Thou hast seen how the floor of this vast temple is everywhere alike. For it nature has woven a carpet of thick velvet moss, which in the first centuries take on no change of hue. 'Tis ever the same. Tear a pathway in a few short days the rent will be made whole. Blaze the trees, the encircling moss will, in a brief period, hide the marks, and all thy labor will be in vain. Even suppose that thou couldst succeed in leaving a lasting trail behind thee. The deadly poison which lurks in the damp air would chill thy life-blood ere thou couldst cross from outer wall to outer wall of this vast temple, with its roof of interwoven moss and foliage, impenetrable to the noonday sun. Thou hast felt the first touch of that deadly chill, which curdles the warmest blood and sends a sleep of death upon the rash intruder. But to me, O my son, Palin Metalin is all light and glow. I cannot see that gloom which strikes such terror to thy soul. And thou must know, my son, that Palin Metalin has no shadows deep enough to hide the North Star from my sight. I always know which way it was the sun went down, and which way it will be that he will rise. For all the winds are known to me, and whence they blow. To thy cheek the air appears to sleep at times, to mine never. 'Tis no more a task for me to catch the breath like zephyr, unfelt by thee, than it is for thy faithful dog to take up the trail of his master's footsteps and follow it through the crowded mart. Then again, thou must bear in mind that for 100 years and more I've been a shadowless figure in this home of shadows, that the trees of Palin Metalin have taken me to their hearts, and I them to mine. That not only do I know how and where they grow, but it hath been revealed to me that these towering children of Palin Metalin are not scattered helter-skelter here and there in orderless manner, but that in a certain measure they are ranged in lines from rising toward the setting sun, each species forming a belt to itself, not like a grove of man's hand planted, but in a wild yet orderly confusion. To thee this would be a useless guide, for thou hast seen how the trunks are swathed in the garbs of moss, and how the gloom gives all the foliage the same deep, dark hue of green. To thine eyes, here, all these trees seem alike, the countless offspring of a single sire. And yet it is not so. For when, in my progress through these lofty corridors of gloom and silence, I sway too far northward or southward, a single handful of leaves crushed in my grasp give up the secret of my whereabouts. But even this sure guiding string has failed me at times, and I have gone astray in the home of my friends. And yet, in such moments, Palin Metalin has no terrors for me. When thus an aimless wanderer in this trackless wood, I learn to draw aside this garb of green which decks Palin Metalin's breast, and lay my hand upon his very heart. So has kind nature sharpened my sense of feeling that by the simple touch of the clay beneath our feet, I can set my erring footsteps right and regain my lost path. Be thou, my son, in coming years, as steadfast in thy search for truth as I have been in my endeavors to change this gloom and silence into living light and speech, and thou wilt walk through life's devious paths as easily as I thread my way through the trackless chambers of Palin Metalin. As Beniaga ceased speaking, he lifted his song, making the trailing mosses sway with the vigors of his notes, now deep and solemn, now clear and far-reaching. The echoes came back, softened down to flute notes. He listened breathlessly. Oh, wonderful man, thought I, even the sleeping echoes rouse themselves to guide thy footsteps aright. Come, my son, he cried in tones of gladness. Our torches go to their end. Let us push on. though the sun be not yet high enough to chase the inky darkness out of Palin Matalin's depths, still, with this guiding string, thou canst follow me." Saying this, he placed the end of a leather thong in my hand, and we set out once more. After we had been an hour or so under way, the sun's rays began to so temper the darkness of the great gloomy forest that my eyes were of some slight use to me. Again Beniaga broke out in a wild chant and paused to catch the echo. "Ah," murmured the blind hermit, half in soliloquy, "that was a greeting from the drowsy waters of Lo Paltul." Imagine the feeling of utter helplessness which came over me an hour or so later when suddenly I found myself standing upon the banks of a broad streamlet of hue blacker than the wings of night, apparently stagnant, or at least so sluggish as to seem well deserving the title drowsy waters. "This is Lual Patul," said Beniaga, as he rested his chin on his hand and seemed to be gazing down into its inky surface. But how to cross it, for no bark was moored in sight, was now the bewildering thought which oppressed my mind. Surely it cannot be forded, for to the eye it seemed as deep as it was silent and mysterious. Nor yet would it be otherwise than inviting death itself to plunge into its stagnant waters and swim to the other side. While I stood thus wrapped in a cloud of anxious thought, Beniaga himself seemed scarcely less perplexed. His usual calmness had deserted him. Drawing some pebbles from his leathern pouch, he cast them one by one into the stream, bending forward to catch the sound they made with eager listening air. Then, turning to the right, he followed the banks of Lual Patul, keeping his staff in the water and beating it gently with the tip, as if striving to draw some secret from it. Again he paused and cast some pebbles into the dark, sluggish stream and bent forward to get their answer. Again he woke the echoes and listened breathlessly to the reply that came, only to take up the march after a brief delay with what seemed to me a somewhat hesitating step. Evidently he was astray. His calm, noble face lost its look of serene confidence. Suddenly, halting, he reached out for a handful of foliage, crushed the leaves in a quick and nervous grasp, inhaled their odor, and then resumed his march as before, with head dropped forward on his breast and doubt and uncertainty visible in every movement. For an instant, the thought flashed through my mind that possibly Beniaga had gone so far astray as to make the discovery of the right course impossible. I could feel my lips draw apart and my heart creep slowly upward into my throat. The thought of a lingering death from starvation in the chill, dark corridors of Palin Matalan set a knife in my heart. I almost tottered as I followed the blind hermit's lead. My tongue was too dry to let me cry out to him in my sudden despair. While these terrible thoughts were chasing each other through my mind, Beniaga halted, and resting his staff upon the branches of the nearest tree, broke out into one of his wild invocations. "O Palin Matalan, Beniaga calls unto thee. Hear him, he is astray. Set his feet on the right path. Let him not wander aimlessly about in thy gloom and silence. O Palin Matalan, he is thy child. Be kind and loving to him." With these words, Beniaga threw himself upon his knees and tore away the thick covering of moss until he had laid bare the forest floor. From this, he took up a handful of the soil and pressed it between his fingers as if to test some secret quality. When he arose, I knew that all was well. A radiant glow played about his features. He was himself again. Catching up his wand, he broke away with mad strides as if pursued by very demons, Only by running could I keep within sight of him. On we sped along the banks of Lul Patul, stream of the drowsy waters. Mile by mile, Beni Aga caroling his wild chants of glad thanks, I running as if bent upon escaping fleshless death itself. Another 100 paces, and I would have fallen headlong to the ground. My feet seemed shod with lead. Bulger set up a most piteous whining as he saw the look of despair settling on my face. Suddenly, the blind hermit halted, and turning toward me, cried out in a joyous tone, "This is the place, my son. It is all over now. Fear nothing. Mount on my shoulders. Thou wilt not add a feather's weight to the burdens which I carry there. Be not troubled about thy dog. Lul Patul has no terrors for him." Such was my confidence in the blind hermit's power to bear me safely across the mysterious stream, that I did not wait for a second bidding to mount upon his shoulders, although, as far as I could see, the waters of Lul Patul looked just as black and deep as ever. Advancing to the edge of the stream, Beni Aga now began with quick and nervous movements of his staff to search for hidden stepping stones. In vain, I strained my eyes to catch some sign of resting place for his feet. And yet they were there, for with giant strides, steady, sure, and rapid, Beni Aga walked over the drowsy waters of Lul Patul and set me safely down on the other bank. I made effort to speak my thanks, but wonderment had robbed my tongue of power of utterance. I could only gaze in silence upon that noble face, now clad in all its former serenity, then turned and followed its owner's footsteps. After a few miles further advance, Beni Aga halted, and bending his gaze upon me as if his eyes were as full of light as his look of avis of radiance, spoke as follows: "My son, my task is done. Look, dost thou not see the gleam of light yonder? 'Tis the outer wall of Palin Matalin. Pass it, and thou wilt enter the world of noise and glare once more. Thou hast no further need of me. Go straight on, and in a brief half-hour the sun's rays will greet thee again. Once outside of this pathless wood, thou wilt find thyself upon a lofty parapet, a sheer height of 200 feet above the plain below. Look about thee, and thou wilt see a stairway of solid rock leading down toward the plain. Not such as built by hands of man, with steps of even height, hewn in regular and smooth, but a rude, fantastic flight of stairs left standing there by nature when she cleared away the mass each side. Upon these narrow steps, smoothed by the beating storms of 10,000 years, the waters daily pour a treacherous slime, so that those who have rashly tried to pass to the far land below now lie among the jagged rocks. No foot is sure enough to tread on the slippery steps of Bolgadrapa. To fall means certain death. I cannot counsel thee, my son. Be wary, be wise. Farewell." As this last word fell from Beni Aga's lips, he flashed out of my sight like a spirit form. The Palin Matalin covered him with her darkness. He was gone. The tears gathered in my eyes. Fain would I have pressed its hand to my lips. I knew it was useless for me to try and call him back or to follow him. So with a heavy heart, I turned and pressed forward in the direction he had indicated. And we'll go on with this story in the next video. Please like, subscribe, leave a comment below. Thanks so much for watching. I love you guys. As Tigger says, ta-ta for now.